Welcome to Side Hustles and Small Businesses. This is our third webinar in the 2024-2025 webinar series for Get Savvy, Grow Your Green Stuff. We appreciate you being here. My name is Andrea Pellegrini, and I run the Student Money Management Center for the entire University of Illinois system. And I am joined today by my colleague, Steve Bobb from UIC Business. Steve, would you like to talk a little bit about yourself and introduce yourself to our attendees?
Thank you. Yes, I'm Steve. I've been at the College of Business at UIC for 10 years now, and I run a program called the Entrepreneurial Support Program, helping entrepreneurs both on campus and in the community to grow their businesses. And I'm happy to be here sharing this afternoon, an hour of your time.
Thank you so much, Steve. So collectively, the Get Savvy webinar team represents organizations across the state of Illinois, which rest on the ancestral lands of multiple Native nations, including the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Ottawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasha nations. And we have a responsibility to acknowledge these Native nations and work with them towards a more vibrant and inclusive society. We're going to launch a poll. So we're going to find that poll since I have so many of them now. And I just launched it. We want to know a little bit about who is joining us today. So this not just helps our partners in Illinois Extension maintain funding for providing free financial education across the state of Illinois, it also helps us understand how to modify some of our examples during the webinar, who's most interested in learning about entrepreneurship, since that's what we're talking about today, or side hustles, since we're also going to talk about that a little bit. And it will hopefully make it a better experience for everyone that's joining us today. It looks like we have everyone from 18 to 54 joining us, so pretty big age range. We have both students and full-time employees, as well as some part-time employees. We have a little bit more women than men joining. And then we have a pretty diverse race and ethnicity going on. So thank you for participating. In the interest of time, I'm going to go ahead and end that poll, but I'll share the results for a second. I won't leave it up too long, but if you don't see it go away when I stop sharing, which I just did, you can always click the little X in the upper right-hand corner. And when I share the next poll, it should still pop up for you. Fingers crossed. All right, so today our learning objectives are to discuss entrepreneurship and our economy and its role in our economy. We're going to explore a little bit about personal finance and business and in side hustles. We'll also talk about the traits of entrepreneurs that are most common, but there's lots of different traits that entrepreneurs may have. We're also going to be reviewing important aspects of starting a business, and we'll provide some resources to address next steps and common questions related to specifically starting a business. So I'm going to hand it over to Steve to talk about entrepreneurship and the economy.
Cool. And we have another poll for our next slide. So we're just curious, what size business do you currently work for? Just interesting to see. So if you can take a few moments to fill that out while I talk, Andrea will close that in a little bit. Oh, and we have a second poll question right after this about have you ever worked for a small business with 20 or less employees? Next slide, please.
So we skipped the what size business do you currently work for poll on accident. It wasn't in our list, but this one is, and it is live. If you
Let's go ahead
do,
and go. Okay, go ahead.
I was just going to say, if you do want to share what size business you're currently working for, you can put it in the meeting chat, and that helps us get a better idea of the perspectives that are here. All right, I
So
did launch the poll, Steve. I'm not sure if you can see it, but we have about 59% have worked for a small business of less than 20 employees, and 41% have not.
cool. Next slide, please. So just a little bit about how the small business world is defined here in the United States. The Small Business Administration is the federal agency that provides resources and helps us understand more about small businesses. And they define small businesses as having less than 500 employees. As someone who's been in the field for a long time, I always find that interesting. I like this second definition here, fewer than 20 employees. I think that's a little more realistic. But we have to go with what the government tells us on this. So there are some numbers on the right hand of the slide about the size of businesses. And so you see, based on this data from 2023, about just over 4 million businesses have under 5 employees. And as you can see, the number of businesses decreases based on the larger size employees. Small businesses are creating lots of new jobs. There's been some studies done over the last couple of years since 1993 until last year. About 61% of all new businesses come from small businesses. Next slide, please. Uh, Here's a slide that the Small Business Administration put together, a map showing just different states where the percentage of small businesses are larger. And so the number of small businesses, I saw a recent number that was a little bit larger. But in terms of the number of businesses that are small, it still continues to stay around 99.9%. There are actually very few very large businesses, but because they have so many employees, they have a large percentage, although about 48.8% of employees based on this statistic, and that hasn't changed too much, work for small businesses. And so next slide. So the gig economy, so there was some data put together by the Pew Charitable Association, I forgot their full name, but they did analysis of the gig economy, and they say that about a quarter of all workers have participated in the gig economy. Doesn't mean that a quarter are currently in it, but just that have at some point in the last few years. Since 2012, the percentage of taxpayers who are reporting self-employment income, which would come from normally from gig work, has increased. The percentage goes up and down each year. Certainly, COVID had those numbers up a little bit more. They've dropped a little bit, but they're still a very large percentage. And in general, these statistics suggest that younger individuals are more active in the gig economy. But at the same time, that's just a percentage. It doesn't mean that all of them really gig workers are of all ages. Next slide, please. So some other statistics about entrepreneurship. Small businesses drive innovation and exports. Many small businesses are involved in exporting, and of the total amount of exports, the percentage of exports that are sent by small businesses is very significant. Um, and the driving innovation, the number of patents applied for is used as a proxy for innovation and suggests that small businesses apply for more patents than larger businesses. There's this perception out there that small businesses are risky and don't survive. Certainly, I think there is a level of risk that needs to be considered, but most statistics suggest that about half of all small businesses make it to year 5, and that about 1/3 make it to year 10 or beyond that. Um, and then it's important that we realize or remember that not every business that's closed is a failure. Some of the reasons a business might close that are not a failure is someone ending up getting an opportunity that is more lucrative to them. And so they felt that that was the better choice for them. Sometimes people sell businesses. Certainly, there are people who buy businesses for strategic reasons. Or just buy businesses because maybe they know that the owner is getting close to retirement. That's a big issue as the boomers move out into retirement. There are businesses for sale. And sometimes businesses merge with other businesses. And so one of them is officially closed, but it hasn't actually gone away. Um, and then sometimes business owners decide that it's time to move on and they have a plan for that, and it's something they plan to do, and it means that statistically the business is no longer there, but the business could still be there. So next slide.
I believe I get to take over now, Steve, if that's
Yep,
okay.
of course.
All right, so we're going to attempt another poll. If I can get it up here. So I just launched a poll. Have you ever worked a contract or gig job? We got lots of no's coming in, but a few yeses. It's kind of a unique type of work. Yes, 27% and no, 73%. We've only had about 64% of people that have participated so far. So don't forget to submit if that is a option on your screen. All right. About 72% of people have participated. We still have a lot more no's than yeses, but I'll go ahead and end the poll and show you who is doing what. So 26% of you said you have worked a contract or gig job, and about 74% of you have not worked a contract or a gig job. So I'm going to stop sharing again. If it's still up, you can exit out of it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about income volatility, which is something that we're bringing up more and more because it's such a big issue in budgeting, right? If you work in a contract job or a gig job, or even you have a normal employment, full-time or part-time, there are certain types of industries that you may experience more income volatility. And this is typically a annual change of either 20 to 25% more or less than the previous year. But even a 5 or 10% variation in your paycheck could be significant, especially for low income folks. A lot of gig workers are lower income, for example, and they're trying to diversify income, or they don't have other options to help them sustain themselves. So if you are in construction or leisure and hospitality, or maybe you're in mining and natural resources, these are the top three industries where income varies the most, at least occasionally, month to month. So there, I'll share that in the chat. Thank you, Richard, for sharing that resource in the chat. But let's talk about what income volatility may mean to risk, right? There's a risk of to your income with income volatility. But there are different ways to think about protecting against risk when it comes to gig workers as well as small businesses. So we're going to talk about income diversification and generate some ideas maybe for that in your business. We're also going to talk about insurance as a mediation against risk. And we're also going to talk about the limited liability company, or LLC, is a legal structure of a small business to help protect against risk when owning a small business. All right, so there was a email from John Acuff a few years ago that we like to reference a lot, to identify ways that you can diversify income as a creative, maybe a content specialist or creator. So these things could include things like writing books, maybe public speaking, doing freelance work. This is often where contract work comes in play. You might produce online courses and sell those courses. You might have retainer clients that you like to keep or establish relationships with, and they pay a retainer to keep you accessible, especially if you are a subject matter expert in something. You might consider calendar sales, right? We're getting ready for the upcoming holiday season. So if you're a creative and you can create calendars, that might be something that helps you diversify income. You might think about affiliates, right? You might also think about subscriptions, things like Patreon, especially if you're producing a lot of work and people like to watch you produce that work. And there's other ideas that, obviously this is a short list, but you might think of other ideas that correlate with your skill set or the services that you provide, and may be helpful for marketing your services, not just diversifying your income. All right, so let's talk a little bit about insurance. So it's important that we're aware that insurance the current insurance that you might have, especially if, for instance, you are a delivery driver. Um, you need to know what is covered under your auto insurance and what is not covered. So a lot of people don't realize that you could be taking unnecessary risks by using your personal vehicle for a side gig. Forbes, for example, reported that you may not have the auto insurance coverage that you need if you are driving a personal use vehicle while working a side gig. So we're sharing that in the chat. You may need to look into commercial insurance or business auto insurance. If you keep inventory for your small business in your home, you might want to make sure you know what your homeowners or renters policy will cover and what they won't cover, and make adjustments based on if it's going to cover all of your small business inventory. There's also a lot with cybersecurity right now. You might need to look into cyber insurance. And if you already have it, what coverage do you have? Or do you need to get based on what your risk is? So cyber insurance generally covers a business's liability for a data breach of sensitive customer information. So if you hold on to that, it's important to look into cyber insurance. And then there's more information on business insurance as well. If you have not heard of Have I Been Pwned? That is a resource for checking if your email or phone number has been part of a data breach, which may inform whether you feel like cyber insurance is an important thing for you to look into. And obviously, with any type of insurance, whether you're doing it for personal risk mitigation or business risk mitigation, you need to identify where the gaps are in your current coverage and what your risk might be so that you can make sure that you are covered appropriately in case something happens. All right, so the main reason that people choose to form a limited liability company or LLC or structure their business some other way is for two main reasons: taxes and liability. So you might need to do some research on what the structure of your business should take, and consulting with three different types of specialists could help you considerably when guiding your decision. So you might want to talk to a lawyer. You might want to talk to an accountant, like a CPA. That's a specific type of certified public accountant. You can also look up their insurance or their license on IDFPR's website. Same with an insurance broker. So insurance brokers can sell a wider variety of insurance options than just an agent in most cases. So that's why looking for a broker rather than an agent when it comes to insurance can be really helpful. They'll be able to provide between the lawyer and the CPA and the insurance broker, they're going to be able to provide different opinions and suggestions based on your business mission and needs and potential risks. But you'll ultimately need to decide what is most relevant to your situation and most important for you to identify insurance or a legal structure that best meets your needs. All right, so when it comes to finances, when it comes to your business or your side gig, there are different components of balancing your finances. For example, you want to have savings in place, especially for an emergency fund, whether you're an individual that does a side gig or if you are a business owner. Remember, we talked about income volatility. Having savings set aside can really help when there's a dip in your income from all that income volatility. Budgeting is obviously important, and it's going to be important for gaining assets down the line if you want to grow your business. But it's really important to separate your funds into different buckets, right? You want to set up, if you have a limited liability company, for instance, you need to separate your your business funds and finances from your personal funds. We have heard that a lot of people that have small businesses are leaving thousands and thousands of dollars in peer-to-peer apps like Venmo or Cash App, but there's no insurance on those uh, types of accounts. So you need to make sure that you're transferring that into an FDIC or NCUA insured bank or credit union account so that it is covered by uh, the insurance that's provided through FDIC or NCUA in case something would happen. You don't have any help if you leave it in Venmo. So just keep that in mind. You also need to think about finances and lending. That's why savings is important and budgeting is important, but so is credit. One thing that people don't understand about credit when it comes to your business and personal finances, that lenders will often require a personal guarantee along with a business signature to make sure that that debt is covered. So you may have to sign twice if you take out a loan, once as the business owner, but once personally, like you are co-signing for the business, so that lender is going to get their money whether or not your business is successful. So that's important to keep in mind. That also means that your credit is kind of combined. So in some instances, you might be opening up a business credit account, and so you might be establishing credit for your business, but you may not get the benefits on your personal credit for on-time payments with your business. So just keep those things in mind, and it gets more complicated. We did a Money in Your Entrepreneurial Pursuit webinar last year that talked more specifically on the finessing of finances between a personal fund as well as a business fund, and some of these aspects around credit that are a little bit more complicated than most people realize. All right, so you can look at the net benefit or cost of your side hustle or small business to help you with budgeting. So one thing that you want to do, you want to total all of your income. You want to subtract any tax liabilities that you have, which include federal, state, county, or municipal taxes, or all four of them. You'll also want to subtract the cost of doing business. So this could mean the cost of your insurance premiums, as well as maybe repairs to the equipment or the building that you are using for your business. It could also include supplies and other materials that you might need in order to conduct business, and that equals your net income. So you might want to estimate this net benefit or cost of a side hustle or small business on a weekly, monthly, or quarterly basis so that you can kind of get a better idea of what to plan for every year. And it may be more irregular, especially the first few years of your business journey or your side hustle journey. All right, so I mentioned this already, but your personal credit is going to be very important as a small business owner, because it can impact your access to things like leases, insurance, the cost of loans, business card rates, and a whole slew of other things. So a lot of times your personal credit is going to impact your access to all of these things, especially at the beginning. Maybe once your business has been successful for like 5 or 10 years, then personal credit may be less important. But during the first few years, personal credit is a really big factor in deciding if you can access any of these things you may need for your business. So just really pay attention to credit worthiness. Learning about credit can be really valuable for enhancing your credit confidence and acumen so you can make your business a little bit more successful. So it's good to have good credit personally for both you and your business. And it is unclear how long that you're in business before your personal credit worthiness kind of separates from your business credit. I know we talked about keeping funding separately on a day-to-day basis, so that if you're audited, there's less confusion, obviously. But for some reason, that credit's going to continue to be intertwined for a while. All right, so there's lots of different ways to learn about credit. We know it's confusing, so you can use the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau at consumerfinance.gov. You can watch previously recorded webinars on YouTube. We also have a Mastering the Consumer Credit Game in December that we're partnering with the Lieutenant Governor's Office on for Illinois. We also have lots and lots of podcast episodes for making sense of money on credit. And then obviously the Student Money Management Center has resources about credit that's helpful, obviously to students, but to anyone that wants to learn about credit and how to manage it, how to improve it, how to establish it. So those are all really good resources to use. All right, so let's talk about some of the traits and characteristics of entrepreneurs. So a lot of entrepreneurs may have risk and reward confidence. So they're willing to take on risks in order to get that reward. This doesn't necessarily mean that they are being risky, but they're able to analyze the risk and the reward balance, and then they're more confident that they made a good decision and aren't going to second guess their decisions. So that's a really helpful trait to have as an entrepreneur. Perseverance. It takes a lot of effort and energy, and it can be kind of a slow process to build a business. Steve shared the last time that we did this webinar that one entrepreneur told him it took twice the money and 3 times the time that they thought they needed to start their business. It also takes a lot of independence. You need to be comfortable doing it by yourself. You may not be able to hire other people in order to get certain things done that you're going to need to get done. So you need to be pretty comfortable with doing it by yourself. And then self-awareness is really important as well. Being aware of what your capacity is and how you function is valuable when you're looking at starting a business or growing your business. All right, so some skills that can be helpful for entrepreneurs is obviously sales. And some people say that, sales aren't my thing. I just want to make my stuff and then people buy it. But we have to do a lot of selling every day. So I have to convince partners like Steve to co-facilitate webinars with me. And a lot of that takes sales skills. I also think it's important that you are able to highlight the benefits of your services or your products so that people are more motivated to buy them. It's also important that you have outside support and resources. I know on the previous slide I said that you need to be comfortable doing things on your own, but it's also valuable to take advantage of close friends or your family or other community resources to help you be successful. Family can also be really helpful in that support system and leveraging your social capital to either help you with encouraging sales or expanding your network, or even sourcing for new employees when it comes time to expand your business and you need some help. Financial stability and risk management, that insurance is really, really important to protecting you against risk. But so is calculating kind of what your projections are and your net cost or benefit to running a business. And then Some people will start a business as a lifestyle business, and that is completely okay. But you need to be aware that starting a business and running a business can be demanding. And so being prepared for that type of lifestyle is really valuable in the sustainability of a side gig or a small business. All right, I love tools. So we're going to put the own net interest profile in the chat. Thank you, Richard. You already did that for us. So this own net interest profiler is a tool that is basically an interest inventory that can help you identify your career interests. People that tend to score heavily on enterprising interests in this tool often have an entrepreneurial spirit, but skills that fall under things like social or artistic or investigative or realistic can also be helpful in starting and maintaining a business. So, whether your strengths are more in realistic or artistic or enterprising, you can leverage those things in a small business. Enterprising may make you more likely to be comfortable with taking risks associated with entrepreneurship. But you can kind of play with that tool and see if it gives you some insights on yourself so you are more aware of where your strengths are and where you might need to lean on others for help as well. All right, I'm going to hand it back over to Steve to do the heavy lifting with the rest of this webinar.
Thank you. So next slide. So we have another poll question for you. Do you currently own a business that's generating revenue? And so if you can answer that, we'll give that a couple seconds here. Why don't we go on to the next slide and then I'll come back to this poll question here. So if you can keep answering that, that would be great. So timing is something that's important to think about. But I also sometimes talk to entrepreneurs who are would-be entrepreneurs who spend a lot of time thinking about what is the right timing for my business. And certainly there are situations where I think you need to think about that. But I also think you should think about, is there a better time? Maybe now is the best time. So don't let the timing issue become too much of a challenge. Let's look at the poll numbers here for a second. Can you close the poll, Andrea? So interesting, we only have 6% of the people who are listening who have answered who've said that they currently own a business that's generating revenue, and 94% are saying that they are not doing that. That's okay. Hopefully, in the next couple months, weeks, you'll decide that entrepreneurship is something to think about, and maybe it will be the right time for you. Let's go to
I,
the next question. Go
I
ahead.
was just curious if anyone is interested in sharing, are you here more for side hustling or for small business? If you can share it in the chat, that would be helpful, I think, for us to plan future webinars as well.
Cool.
So I'm going to stop sharing and we'll go to the next slide.
Cool. So I have a strong belief that everybody here who wants to start a business should start by putting together a written business plan. Certainly, there are lots of different ways you can put together a business plan, but whether you're thinking about a side hustle or a business plan or a traditional business, I think you need to have some kind of a document to help you. President and General Eisenhower said, and certainly his context was a little bit different, but he said, plans are worthless, but planning is everything. And as someone who's worked with a lot of entrepreneurs over many years, I can tell the difference when I talk to someone who's taken the time to start to put together a plan. And I can't tell you what that is, but there's just something that shows me that people who are taking the time to plan are more thoughtful and have really put some energy into thinking about it. Now, one of the reasons why he says plans are worthless, or I think he said plans are worthless, is because I do know that nothing in life is going to happen the way we planned. But there's something about going through the planning process that helps that when things do happen that maybe we didn't expect, we're just better prepared and we can make adjustments on the fly in a more effective way. We want to be proactive and not reactive. And so planning helps us to be proactive. Some things that are helpful about the planning process. is it helps us address common issues that other people have faced. The quote, "We don't know what we don't know." Um, I used to hate hearing that, but as I worked with entrepreneurs, I realized that that is so true. And there is a process that a plan forces you to go through that helps you really be forced to think about things that maybe you would have completely skipped, or maybe you would have chosen to skip because you just didn't want to deal with it. And the reality is that in business, you're going to have to deal with a lot of different things. And so hopefully the plan helps us get there. Uh, Gain insights on what we don't know, again, forces us to ask questions about topics that maybe wouldn't be so excited. Maybe some of us, Andrea mentioned before, maybe you just want to produce a product and you hope that someone else will sell it. Well, the planning process is going to ask you to think about your plans to sell, and that will hopefully give you insight on things that you didn't know. And then I would encourage you to be confident to surround yourself with people who are smarter than you. There's lots of business owners who talk about both being afraid to hire smarter people because it might um, intimidate them and make them feel uncomfortable. But a lot of very successful businesses owners will tell you that the reason they're successful is because they were willing to bring in people who were smarter and who understood more. And hopefully that will help you be more confident, and it will help you address those issues that you don't know. Let's go on. So there are lots of different ways to think about business plans. And if you would do an internet search, you'll find all kinds of different tools. I think there are three things that a plan has to have. The focus of the plan is to tell us how you're going to make money. How are you going to have profit? And you need to talk about your marketing plan. What is the way you're going to communicate with people? And then how are you going to operate? And we don't want to have melted ice cream. If we're making ice cream, I often say um, there's a part of that where you have to make good ice cream, but there's a part of it where you have to deliver it. So if you can't deliver it, it doesn't matter how good it is. And then again, I rarely meet people who don't have a financial motive for going in business. Many people who are looking at side hustles are doing it because they want to make some extra money. Most entrepreneurs want to make money so that they can work for themselves and not necessarily work for somebody else. So you've got to take the time to understand the financial side of your business. And from a planning process, that starts typically by putting together financial projections um, of looking for the next year, the next 2 years, maybe the next 5 years. That is a challenging process, but it can be done, and you need to do it so you know what's going to happen. Next slide, please. I've put together a startup checklist, and there's a link, and I know that that will be put in the chat in just a few minutes. But here are some things that we're going to talk about real quick as we move through the next parts of this. So this is just a list, an overall list. Let's go ahead and go on to the next slide here. So there are two types of planning documents that I would encourage you to think a little bit about and take some time. Um, if you search on the internet, you should find a feasibility checklist. And in the checklist that was just put in the chat, there's a link to a feasibility checklist that's provided in a book called Starting Your Business in Illinois Handbook. And a feasibility checklist often has some areas that talk about personal considerations. We've talked about some personal traits, and I think it's worth you spending a little bit of time answering some questions about how do you like to work, what's important to you, those kinds of issues, because entrepreneurship is some unique traits. I don't never found a list that I felt confident that said, "Oh, if you have these characteristics, you'll be a good entrepreneur, and if you have these characteristics, don't do it." Um, but there are some things that often entrepreneurs think about, and so I encourage you to think about your personality and those characteristics. And then a feasibility checklist often helps you identify major weaknesses and challenges. And I like to see it as kind of a light version of a business plan. You start to put together some information and really see, okay, does this make sense? Are there things I need to be cautious here? Sometimes also a feasibility checklist can help if someone has multiple ideas and it's like, well, I could do this or I could do that, which is better. And so the feasibility will help with that. Then I encourage you to go into the real significant work of putting together a business plan. And I do want you to take that seriously and know that it's a big process. It's not something that you can do. I don't know how many times I've had conversations with people over the years, and I'll have a conversation on Thursday or Friday, and someone will say, "Oh, on Monday morning, I'll send you my business plan." That never happens, and I know part of the reason that never happens is I don't think you can write a good business plan in a weekend. I think you can get a really good start on it, but it is going to take some time. And the purpose of the plan is to help you communicate how the business will generate a profit. And we definitely have to have sections on marketing, operations, and finance. Some other templates organize things in a different way. Um, I don't think that there is a specific way that you have to do a business plan. I do think that at the end, there should be information on marketing, operations, and finance, and there'll probably be some other stuff in there. And if you're going to use this as a startup plan, you probably want to talk about the startup process. And so I consider that the launch plan part, because there probably are some activities that you'll do as you get started that you might only do once, like a grand opening and things like that. But they're helpful to think about and plan for and start to go through that process. Next slide, please. So as you are going through the planning process, one of the things you'll need to think about is what is the structure you're going to use for your business. So Andrea mentioned that this focuses on two areas: your personal liability and your taxes. Um, Talking to an accountant and a lawyer and an insurance agent are all really important to help you make this decision. You're probably going to find that they're going to disagree, and that one person's going to say, "Oh, you need to do this because of this." And ultimately, you're going to have to decide, okay, which is the direction that works for me? What is the way that I think will make best in my situation? The four common structures that people talk about, there are a few others, but the most common are the sole proprietor. A sole proprietor just means that there's one owner. Sometimes people have said, "Oh, a sole proprietor can't have employees." That's not true. A sole proprietor can have employees, but there is just one person. When there's two or more people, that's normally some type of a partnership. There is kind of what's called a general partnership. Uh, Lawyers especially get uncomfortable with this because technically there are possibilities of one partner doing things that the other partner could really be impacted by. Um, Hopefully, say a bank would, if they found out there was a partnership, they would ask for documents. But theoretically, a challenge of a partnership is one partner could possibly borrow money and the other person could be responsible. So if you're going to do a partnership, it's really important that you have some agreements in writing so that those can be shared with people, so that people know exactly what the relationships are. Probably the form of business that's most commonly talked about is the LLC, the limited liability company. Uh, One of the advantages is it's rather inexpensive in Illinois to do this, and it does provide the personal liability that the two forms of business before that don't provide a lot of personal liability protection. Then there's also the S corporation. The S corporation is a popular thing in terms of addressing some tax issues, but excuse me, I'm going to sneeze in a second, but there are some other ways to address that. Um, Once you've chosen which way you're going to have a structure, then you need to go through registering that process. And unfortunately, they're each a little bit different for how you register that. Like the S corporation has some nuances. You can only choose to be an S corp at certain times of the year. Um, Especially the sole proprietor is pretty simple. You should register that with the county you're in, but you don't register a sole proprietorship with the state, whereas the LLC you do and the S corporation you do register with the state. So again, the handbook that I've suggested in the checklist has some hints, and there are lawyers and accountants who you can ask for advice on going through that process. Next slide. So we want to think a little bit about intellectual property. I believe that almost every business does have intellectual property and information that they need to come up with a plan to protect. Now, we often think about, hear a lot about copyrights and patents, and trademarks and trade secrets are also important. Those are the four official ways that we legally talk about protecting information. But even if you choose not to use one of these forms to protect information, your business is going to be having information and keeping information that you'll need to decide how you want to protect it. And um, just as you develop that information, you want to make sure that you protect it in the appropriate way for you. So even how you store it on your computer, do you make backups? Are you backing things up in the cloud? Oh, but what happens if there's a hiccup in the cloud or something? So those are things you want to start to think about and be prepared, because we never know when there's going to be some kind of a hiccup. The other thing about the legal forms of protecting IP, do remember that in most cases, if you choose any of those forms, you still have to be the owner of it, still has to be the person who initiates something. So if I had a patent for something and I felt somebody copied it, I would still have to go after them. The government's not just going to automatically say, oh, Steve has a patent, so no one can copy this. The patent holder has to initiate legal action. And so there is a cost to doing that. Now, if you win, then in most cases, the government will allow you to also hopefully collect on that situation, but you have to start that and pay for the costs until the courts determine that you've actually won it. So let's go ahead and move on to the next slide here. Uh, Taxes are really important to be thinking about. Again, based on your legal structure, there'll be some nuances, but in most cases, you as a business owner have to be concerned about income tax. Depending on what you're selling, you might have to deal with sales tax. If you have employees, you will have some taxes related to that. Typically, those are called withholdings, where you're taking money from your employees. And there could be some other nuances depending on exactly what type of business you're in. Your accountant will be your best friend to help you through this. The Internal Revenue Service at the federal level has a lot of good information on their website. Make sure that you go to irs.gov and look around there. There is a section specifically on self-employed and small businesses, and it's important that you pay attention to that. It's also important that you check in with the Illinois Department of Revenue. One of the things about all the government agencies is they don't tend to know very much about the other government agencies. So the IRS will certainly know that the state has a Department of Revenue, but won't be able to help you on what the rules are that you need to follow in the state of Illinois or any other state that you might be located. And our friends at the Illinois Department of Revenue don't have the ability to give us advice on IRS rules as well. So you'll have to connect with both of them. Um, People who work for you are either called independent contractors and employees. There are some challenges about making sure you understand and manage that relationship properly. Just because two people agree that a relationship is defined in a certain way, in this case, the IRS is a little more aggressive on these things. And even if you had a written agreement saying that someone was going to be an independent contractor to you, the IRS could come in and question that. The IRS, I think is fair to say, believes that employee-employer relationships are better from a tax standpoint from the IRS's perspective. And so they tend to appreciate employees more than they do independent contractors. Um, but there are some processes, especially if you're going to have employees, you need to have an I-9, which is the form that tells if someone is eligible to work in the United States. And the W-4 is what helps you when you're setting up for the withholding taxes and sending those in. And the government is very aggressive that if you have employees, you must send those taxes in when they're required to be sent in. And depending on how much you're collecting from your employees depends on how often you need to send it in. Most small business owners probably have to send that money in once a month to the federal government. Next slide, please. Um, a couple of other things to be aware of as you think about small businesses. The state of Illinois, the federal government is really pushing all the states to really make sure that people have opportunities to save for retirement. And so the Illinois has set up a program called the Illinois Secure Choice Program. And any employer who has more than 5 employees or 5 or more employees must set up this opportunity to let those employees save for their retirement using the Illinois Secure Choice. Um, I recently helped an employer go through this process and set it up. It's a little bit challenging right at the beginning, and there are definitely some strict rules about the process, about the timing. But once you get it set up, it's a pretty straightforward thing. You're just giving the employees the opportunity to set aside money in a savings account, and do that through the state of Illinois. And there's no cost to the employer to do this other than to send in the state the money that's collected from those employees. Um, and then the federal government recently set up a process that started just in 2024. This is very new, but is going to get a little more complicated, called beneficial ownership information. And it's a process to try to make sure that there is transparency in who owns businesses, that there are less shell companies. And so currently, any business that was set up before the beginning of 2024 has through all 2024 to register. Any businesses set up in 2024 have 90 days to register. And starting next year in 2025, all new companies will have to register within 30 days to provide some basic information about who owns the business. Um, it sounds a little scary and it's something new that our country hasn't done before. Um, if in most cases, for most small business owners, it's not going to be super complicated. There are some exceptions about who doesn't have to do it, but in general, the exceptions are for either very large companies that are already registered in other ways, or for companies that, um, again, would have registered through various other processes. And so, for most small businesses, they will have to do it. It is not something that you have to do every year. You only have to do it when there's a change. So if you create a business and you're the owner for the next 20 years, you only have to do it once. Now, like a condo association or a nonprofit, every time the board changes, they would have to provide this information again. But for most small businesses, it's a one and done type thing. Next slide. Um, Permits, licenses, compliance, and insurance, all these fun things. Um, These are often based on your legal structure and your physical location. So certainly, if you are in, I'm used to talking to people in Chicago. So in Chicago, there's an office called the Business Affairs and Consumer Protection, BACP, at the City Hall. If you're not in Chicago, you would need to talk to your local municipality, your village, or city or township, um, and they would have some information. Most physical businesses have to have some kind of a license for that. Certainly, businesses that are in the food area typically have to be registered and inspected to make sure that they're keeping the food appropriately cold or hot and storing things appropriately. Um, there are some other types of industries where people typically are personally registered. So, doctors, pretty much anything in the medical field, also in like architecture and engineering, things where if someone is very negligent, there could be some loss of life. The state of Illinois, through the Illinois Department of Professional and Financial Regulation, it might be financial and professional regulation, I never remember which is first, but IDFPR, if you search that, you can see, and they do have a list on their website of the different agent types of employment, types of fields or industries which they regulate. And if you were in a different state, you would have to check with the state government to see that. Purchasing insurance. Uh, Not every business has to have insurance, although in many cases there are reasons why they do. So certainly if you have a physical location, your landlord's going to require that you have insurance. Um, Having insurance is probably something you do want to do because it helps limit the risk. And certainly, we've just seen the hurricane. Um, if you didn't have insurance, then if there was some damage to your inventory or to your physical space, you wouldn't have any way to take advantage of the insurance for that. So um, just it's always worth having a conversation with your insurance agent. And I can tell you from personal experience, you want to ask loads and loads of questions of your insurance agent. I'll never forget one day having a call with an insurance agent and saying, or an insurance broker, um, and finding out that something that I thought was going to be covered wasn't covered, and how frustrating that was, and wishing that I had had conversations before to understand when they do cover and when they don't cover. We are running tight on time. Let me do one more slide here, and then, Andrea, we can talk about our next steps. Um, so these are all things that I've talked about so far that I would encourage you to do before you start to sell your product or service. If you are currently selling products or service and you've skipped any of these steps, I would encourage you to go back. And hopefully your business plan, as you put together your business plan, it then gives you a process that you're going to use for your marketing, for your operations, and your finance. And yes, tracking your finances and generating reports is super important. I've been spending hours and hours with an entrepreneur who seems to be relatively successful, but she's not been tracking her finances at the level. And I can guarantee that it takes more energy to go back after the fact and figure it out than it would have been had she started it on day one to actually track this stuff appropriately. So, Andrea, what should we do about this?
All right, so let's talk about some of those next steps and common questions. So, do you need, oh, sorry, I think this is you
No,
still, Steve. No, is this
it,
me?
it is, it is, but it's 1 o'clock. So, uh,
All right,
here's,
so anyone that needs to leave, obviously you can leave. We are recording this, so we will share the recording once it's been edited and captioned to be ADA compliant. We don't want to keep anyone that needs to be somewhere else, but we do understand this is a very fascinating topic, so you can stay on. But Steve, if you want to go ahead
good.
and continue talking.
I'm happy. So some common questions here. Do you need a written business plan? Um, Honestly, I don't think that there's any official source is going to tell you you must have one, but I can tell you that you really do need one. And many cases where you're going to be looking for, if you're going to be looking for funding, they're going to ask to see a business plan. And I think that it will just help you be much more organized. Sometimes people say, how long should a business plan be? Um, I would say that in my experience, most good business plans are 10 to 20 pages. Certainly, I've seen some that are 8 pages and are really good. I've probably seen some that are 5 pages, but a 3 page plan normally doesn't look detailed enough. And once it goes over 20 pages, it starts to become a lot of information. Is it necessary? It could probably be done shorter. So I just, for people who are just thinking about this, I say think about 10 to 20 pages. It might be a little longer with all the attachments, but the actual text that someone's really going to be focused on is probably 10 to 20 pages. Next slide, please. How much money do you need to launch? There was an interesting survey a number of years ago. The CEOs of a group called the Inc. 5000. And so Inc. magazine is a business magazine that for the last couple of years has been identifying the 5,000 fastest growing companies in the United States. And so in 2018, they surveyed the CEOs, and 42% of those CEOs said they started with less than 5,000, and another 21% said they started with less than 25,000. So based on this data, about 63% said they started with under 25,000. Now, certainly there's been some inflation since then. Um, but the real thing is your business plan should help you have a solid number, and your financial projections, you can put together a financial projection that can be really helpful to go through this. And I always hate when someone says to me, and I know bankers hate this, when someone says, well, how much money can I borrow? That is a relevant question at some point in the discussion, but the real situation should be, I've put together financial projections. I need $120,000. I need $15,000. You should know what that is. And then you should be saying, what size loans does your institution offer? But it's always uncomfortable, and it tells me someone hasn't done a plan when someone goes to a lender and just says, well, how much do you make in loans? How big are the loans you make? That's not the right answer. Next slide. Sources of capital. So another survey that was done a few years ago, and I think is still pretty relevant to these numbers, suggests that personal savings and family savings are about 64% of the way businesses get started. Only about 18% get loans from banks. Banks tend to want to know that they can get repaid, and they don't feel real confident in that typically until a business has been around for 2 or 3 years. So that's typically why that's a pretty low number. Personal credit cards are very commonly used to help start businesses. You just need to be really careful about that. I think all of us who support the Get Savvy series would say, if you can avoid personal credit cards, you should avoid personal credit cards for starting a business. but we understand that entrepreneurs do that. And just be really careful because there's a lot of risk involved in that. Next slide. Uh, what about angels and venture capital investors? So angels are people who invest in small businesses. The reality is, I think that this statistic, and again, this is a little bit old, but I think it's still relevant. Less than 1% of businesses get angel investment. And venture capital, it's even less. Venture capital tend to be people who are pooling funds from other people. And I think, even though it sounds crazy, 0.05, I think that it's probably realistic. It's not uncommon that venture capitalists will say that they look through 1,000 or more business ideas before they invest in them. Typically, they're looking for really businesses that have huge opportunities, are moving really fast, growing fast. And for most entrepreneurs, angels and venture capitalists are definitely a long shot. But depending on what you're doing, there are always, and especially in the academic environment, there are always entrepreneurs who have some really cool ideas that could make a big difference in the market. And those are the types of ideas that those type of investors are looking for. Next slide. So my thing that I always ask people to do when I'm done talking is write down some next steps. What are the 3 things you're going to do for yourself after you've heard me talk about starting a business? And I would really encourage you to put dates on that. When are you going to get it done by? There's a business consultant named Brian Tracy. He said the simple act of writing down a goal and making a written plan for its accomplishment moves you to the top 3%. So let me give us about a minute to give you some time to write down goals, and then we've got a few more slides and we'll wrap up.
Steve, while we're giving people some time to write down their next steps, I got a couple direct messages and questions that we might be able to address quickly.
Okay, let's start with that.
One person asked, how would you define the difference between a side hustle and a small business? They were looking for, like, is it an income-driven thing or something else? I have my opinion, but I would like to know what your opinion is.
I would say that the first thing that would come to mind on that is how much time is invested. Um, I think for most small businesses, it really does need to be a significant amount of time that someone's investing. Ideally, it's your full-time job. But I know that maybe that's not realistic, but it's going to be a lot more time. Whereas to me, a side hustle is something that maybe, 5 hours a week, 10 hours a week, something that you're doing while you're also doing a full-time job.
And I would, after I responded privately, but after reflecting on it a little bit, side hustle isn't like a clearly defined term where there's a lot of um, consensus around what it means. Some people use the term side hustle to refer to their part-time job. Sometimes people refer to it to their small business that's run out of their home. Um, some people refer to it as a contract job or gig work. But I think the legal business structure aspect is important with small business, whether you're defining it yourself as a side hustle or a small business.
Yeah, makes sense.
And then the other thing that we were asked is, can real estate be a side hustle? And this is a whole thing. If you own real estate and you're renting it out, it can diversify your income. It's an asset, but it wouldn't necessarily be considered a side hustle since it's more of a passive income situation. But if you're a realtor, what is your idea on that, Steve?
Yeah, I think real estate's a challenging issue because most of the financial opportunities in terms of borrowing money, finding investment for real estate become much more complicated. If you go to any financial institution and you mention real estate, they respond in a very different way. From their perspective, remember that as as savers or users of a financial institution, we want the institution to be um, insured by the FDIC or the NCUA, which NCUA is for credit unions, um, and the other one, and I just dropped out of my
Federal
brain,
Deposit
the
Insurance
federal deposit.
Corporation. If
That's for banks. And by the way, just I used to work for a credit union, and I do all my personal financing through credit unions. I love credit unions. There is a private system for credit union insurance, which I think is trustworthy as well. I believe it's called ASE, but I know you can look that up. Um, but because they're regulated institutions, when real estate comes into play, their rules about financing them become much more complicated and typically makes it very hard for someone to do that as a side hustle and get traditional financing. So for that reason, real estate is just a kind of a complicated thing, kind of a thing that, if you talk to me, you would probably think I don't like it. It's not necessarily that I don't like it. It's just that it becomes so much more complicated to fund it that you have to be careful about it. Um, there are some people who just have a couple of units and they rent those out, and it's a pretty, I would call that more of a side hustle if it's just a pretty low involvement. But there are other people who want to either be selling real estate very actively, be an agent. That to me is more of a small business, or someone who is buying distressed real estate, fixing it up, and then either flipping it or renting it out, but there's a lot of energy going into the repairing process. To me, that starts to become more of a typical small business, but the inventory is just real estate. So I think there's a place for all of these, but I think you have to understand the challenges that they each bring and what kind of resources you need to bring to the table. For a lot of people, real estate sounds really good, but then they realize that the financing side of it is difficult.
And it's very market driven. Like certain markets, it's going to, whatever approach is going to work better or worse than another market. So, yeah. And I said that it was complicated, and you thought of more things than I did. So it is definitely complicated. So I think we can move on though.
Okay. So I hope you put some goals together. I just really want to encourage people to plan for next steps and then follow through on them. And I hope that will be helpful. So here's another slide about the venture series. So one of the things I do through the College of Business is I present. It's a series of 4 workshops called the Venture Series. I do this typically twice each semester. So my next round will start on November 12th. And if you're interested, you can go to that website, and that's been put in the chat. Thank you, Richard. And if you're part of the University of Illinois community, there's a code VS4UIC. And please enter that in caps letters, and you can register at no cost. If you're not part of the UIC community, it's $10 per session. If you do register before the first session, instead of $40, it's only $30. So thank you for letting me put a plug there. Some other resources, if some of the stuff I've said is interesting to you and you want to do more research on your own, a couple of resources here that definitely encourage you to check out. The Small Business Administration, SBA.gov, has a number of resources, and they also do have some offices both in Springfield and Chicago. At learn.sba.gov, there are lots of resources that you can learn, and there's some really good resources there for some broad information and into some very good topics. So that's one place to check out. The city of Chicago, through some partnerships, has put together this website, Chai Biz Hub. There's information about a number of organizations in the city that will help you grow your business. And so there's also a listing of other events that other partner organizations through Chai Biz Hub are putting up there, so you can learn about all kinds of trainings. Some of them cost a little bit, some of them are free. And then if you're part of the university system, in Urbana, there's Illinois Entrepreneurship. In Springfield, there's the Center for Entrepreneurship. And then in Chicago, I'm at the Entrepreneurial Support Program. You gonna do the summary, Andrea, or you want me to?
can do it. So,
Cool.
the things that we kind of covered today is that we emphasize the role of entrepreneurship in our economy and the benefits that provides as far as net new businesses or new employment opportunities. We also talked about how personal finances can impact business finances. We talk about this more explicitly in the webinar Money in Your Entrepreneurial Pursuit, which is on ILStudentMoney's YouTube channel. We also talked about some of the characteristics that entrepreneurs typically have. So it's important to kind of understand yourself, know your habits, know your strengths, know your weaknesses, and how it might impact how you manage your business and where you might need some assistance. We also provided Steve's very valuable checklist to help you think about your business plan. And we also talked about a few resources to support your entrepreneurial journey. We also have a post-webinar survey that hopefully you can take. We'll also link this in the follow-up email that I send once the webinar recording has been edited and captioned appropriately. So we will share that. And then our next webinar is November 7th on building, protecting, and leaving your nest egg. We're going to talk about how to grow wealth through investments and what to do for estate planning when it comes to transferring that to the next generation. We also have lots of our webinars that are recorded available on YouTube. I know I talked about the Money in Your Entrepreneurial Pursuit, but we also have tons of other things. We just did a budget hacks webinar that talks about behavioral economics and different tools for tracking expenses that might be helpful for automating some of the responsibilities of managing your business finances or tracking those. We also are going to be putting this particular webinar on that playlist. I'd like to thank all the collaborators in the Get Savvy webinar series, especially the UIC College of Business's Entrepreneurial Support Program. Thank you, Steve. And we'll stick around for questions, but if you have to go, we know we took a little bit longer today, and I know we started a little bit late, but hopefully it was still valuable and you still got a lot out of it. If you do have questions, we're going to go through the chat and make sure we address any other questions that you had. So thank you again for joining us today. Feel free, if you have questions later, to email studentmoney@uillinois.edu or Steve Bob at the UIC Entrepreneurial Support Program.
My
But
email is just sbob@uic.edu, and I'd be
thank
happy
you,
to answer
Steve.
your emails.
Thank you, Steve. So if you don't remember SBOB, that seems actually easier than the student money at uillinois.edu, then we will also share any questions we get about small business with Steve from this webinar. All right, we did have one question. What is the student discount code for the entrepreneurial support program? I think, did we
So
share it in the chat?
it's I don't know if we put it in the chat. I always have to look it up just to make sure. VS is in Venture Series 4, and it's UIC. Someday I need to fix that. So VS for UIC, and it's all caps.
I just put it on the screen. It's at the very bottom here.
Thanks.
All right,
And if you're
Richard.
having a problem with that, drop me an email and I'll send it to you. I have an email that I send out a lot. I'm always happy to share that with UI folks.
Thank you, Steve. Steve, I'm not sure if you got any direct messages. I got a few with questions, which we already addressed. But Richard, did you notice any questions or get any questions privately that we should address?
No, there was just one question asking about the links, but that was shared with him. So,
All right.
good.
Thank you all for joining us and have a great rest of your afternoon.